Nice here, Analog Archives. I hope all you guys are doing all right. All right, time for a new video, man. I was kind of scrolling through YouTube or something, but and these videos had popped up essential top 10 essential death metal, and they're not that recent. Maybe one's like a year old or 2 years old. But I started watching, and I'm like, I kind of disagree on a lot of these. Thought so instead, I thought, well, I'll just make mine. And I know like it's all subjective to like what your favorite is, but I think these aren't my favorites. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying these are essential. And I think that's where people get a little mixed up, especially the people that were talking, because they're talking about their favorite records. Um, and I'm like, well, you didn't say favorite, you said essential. If it's favorite death metal, then you can pick whatever the fuck you want, right? But essential means something different. This means like basically the pinnacle of the genre, right? Like these are the records that set the bar that everyone else has to either be at or go above and beyond. But it's like the blueprint, right? I mean, the blueprint that is already death metal, I want to say, because some of these bands, although very early on in death metal, obviously there's other bands that created the genre. Extreme thrash, Celtic Frost, Slaughter, fucking Slaughter Lord. I mean, Necrovore, all those bands, right? Early Creator, Destruction, Sodom, all those bands. That was a blueprint for death metal. Um, and then these bands took that. They took basically thrash and made it heavier and more brutal, more about death and gore and because thrash at the time I think was getting stale. It was every band wanted to be fucking Anthrax and wanted to sing about fucking nuclear war and oh, we're so environmental. Like that's not what fucking thrash started out as, but that's a different video. Um, but I think these guys were sick of that, and I think that's how most scenes get. The bands get kind of lame, like it gets like watered down with what originally was supposed to happen, and another genre starts or subgenre as it is with death metal. But anyways, let's kind of get into it. So, anyways, I saw these videos and I'm like, that's not essential. Like, yeah, Cryptopsy, None So Vile. I was like, I don't think that's essential death metal. That came out way after. Essential death metals came out. Death metals. Essential death metal records came out, right? So it's not favorite, it's essential. So I've got a little more than 10. The last 10, so this is number 10, but I picked three for this one because I think these three all deserve to be mentioned at once instead of going like I didn't want to put them in the list because I think these three sum up 1991 as the essentials for me. And everything after this is going to be uh is going to be before 91. So it's all going to be pre 91. So these three are all from 91. Let's start out with Grave. Into the Grave. So yeah, man, Into the Grave. Obviously, fucking classic. And the reason I picked this one, I love the second record as well. And I first heard these guys on the Into the Eyes of Death compilation with like Morgoth, and I think Unleashed was on there, and Tiamat, if I'm not mistaken, which was a great comp. And the songs I heard on there, I think were Haunted for sure. This also has Extremely Rotten Flesh on it. Day of Mourning. Oh man, Hating Life is on here. Deformed. Just fucking just crushing songs, man. And this is like brutal in its own way, but not brutal death metal, but definitely heavier than the acts that were coming out of Sweden at the time. I felt this record gave it a little bit more brutality than some of those records. And fucking just I think this band is super influential, especially to bands coming out now. When I hear newer bands, I'm like, oh, it sounds like Grave. Sounds a lot like Grave. And I don't think they get the credit. Most people are just like, oh, it sounds like fucking Entombed. It doesn't, man. Just because it's HM2 doesn't mean it sounds like Entombed. They sound like Grave to me, a lot of bands, but and besides Hating Life, I don't think they've had like a bad record. They kind of got into that groove thing for a little bit, but um, even those records aren't that bad when they reformed. I still liked them. Um, yeah, they're not going to be the first, two records, but never going to be, right? Speaking of Unleashed, we have Where No Life Dwells, and this is another one on Century Media. Again, man, just Out of the Ashes has been tuned. You got Johnny Headland that formed Unleashed. And I remember getting this demo and being like, fuck, man, this is so fucking killer. And I had the Grave demo too, honestly, before I heard that version, which was on Eyes of Death. But the Eyes of Death, man, it just like destroyed the demo sound. So it's one case where like a band kind of had a better sound than on the demos. But man, this record, Where No Life Dwells, Dead Forever, Before the Creation of Time, just fucking amazing. Violent Ecstasy, Where Life Ends, The Dark One, just killer dark Swedish death metal. I think this is almost like a Megadeth Metallica thing. Like, oh, I'm out of Nihilist, now I'm gonna form this ultra heavier band, Unleashed, and that's what he did. And fuck yeah, man, still going. And again, not a band that really hasn't released a bad record. Yeah, they had that like mid area where they had like a couple of like lameish records. I can't remember the names of them, but even those records had some decent songs on them. I mean, they had some goofy songs too, but um, yeah, Unleashed again, just killer band, man. Killer record. Second one's good too. Up next, another Swedish banger. We have Dismember, Like an Ever Flowing Stream. Yeah, man, with the back cover there. Classic on Nuclear Blast. When Nuclear Blast was like just putting out banger after banger, right? Again, dude, the songs on here, every song on here, Override the Overture, the way that this album's mapped out is also really, really well done. The way that they put the songs together on here, I really like the way it works. Override the Overture, Into Soon to Be Dead, Bleed for Me, And So Is Life, Dismembered, Skinner Alive, Sickening Art, In Death Sleep, all 100% bangers. Just a fucking great record. Man, sometimes this is my favorite Swedish death metal record. Then sometimes it's Carnage, which is basically the same band. Um, Carnage turned into Dismember, but sometimes it's Carnage, sometimes it's Dismember, and sometimes it's Entombed. It just varies, man. It just varies. Sometimes it's Grave. Like I can't pick a favorite, but I think those three records are very essential to Swedish death metal in 1991 and the scene that's going on today. I think those three records kind of embody a lot of what people are playing or what they're influenced by, even if they don't know it. I think the bands that they listen to are influenced by that, so it just brings it out. And I can hear a lot of that when I hear new stuff. And it's not a bad thing all the time. It's just stuff you've heard before. It's just another band playing homage to another band, right? So, all right, let's get on. Number 9. I'm taking these out of the sleeve. So, Deicide, self-titled on, what was this on? Road Racer. This came out in 1990, I believe. Did I write it? Yes, 1990, man. Look at those guys. Evil motherfuckers, right? Or so you thought when you were that age. Pretty cool. Just balls to the wall, fucking death metal, right? A lot of thrash metal. Check that out. Sick insert. Get your blue grape shirts. How much was a shirt? Does it say? $13. $13, and you can get your Demolition Hammer Torture Existence tour shirt. Fucking sick. But anyways, yeah, dude, this was like over the top satanic, um, lunatic at God's creation, sacrificial suicide, Dead by Dawn, dude. Fuck. Carnage and Temple of the Damned. Yeah, fucking Day of Darkness. Just ripping fucking catching songs. Like this whole album just fucking shreds. It's almost like fucking Rain and Blood or something. It's just one after another, and it just fucking crunchy, fucking guitar, fucking ripping, man. A lot of it reminds me of Dark Angel, Darkness Descends. A lot of the riffage on this, but just sped up, so you can tell where their influences were. Obviously, in 1990, all of these bands are all going to be influenced by the heavier thrash stuff, right? But for me, this is the album for me for Deicide. I like the other two that came after, or the other three. I mean, they're good. They're just not this record. I felt like this record had the energy and the just the evilness that the other records didn't really have. It just started getting kind of cheesy, where it was like, well, we got to be more satanic than the last record, but it just didn't come off that way. Whereas this record actually like came off as something sounding evil, which is really hard to do, and I think this record does it. But yeah, banger of a record, dude. What we're drinking, we're just drinking a Victoria, nice Mexican lager with a lime. All right, and now we are on number 8, and we're gonna go. I'm not gonna take this one out, but Obituary, Slowly We Rot. Again from Florida, 1990, I believe. No, 89. 89, man, this album came out. Look at that cover. This thing is just fucking heavy as shit. Internal bleeding, godly beings, till death, slowly we rot, immortal visions, gates of hell, words of evil, suffocation, intoxicated, deadly intentions, blood soaked, stink of puss, heavy, crunching, immense death metal, man. Very Celtic Frost influence, but doesn't sound like Celtic Frost, but you can tell the heaviness is there. This was like one of those bands that was just different. Just like Deicide was different. It was heavy and crunchy. It didn't sound like anything else that was coming out at the time. Um, and that's what was cool about this time and with Florida and those bands. Like every band kind of had their own identity. Whereas now you hear a lot of bands, oh, that sounds like Obituary. You know what I mean? That sounds like Deicide, whatever it may be. But essential, man. Essential record at number 8. Number 7, we are going to go 1989 yet again for Carcass Symphonies of Sickness. Um, man, just a banger. I remember getting this record when it first came out. This is the actual version I bought. Um, just killer, dude. Eric, this record was like, if a band was, I mean, their first record was more of a gore grind band, and this has some grind elements too, but a lot of death metal had grind elements, and people always call those bands death metal. So why does this one always get like, oh, that's a grind record? It's like, not really, dude. Like, if you listen to a lot of the other Swedish death metals or even Finnish death metal records, they have a lot of blast beats and a lot of grind stuff in them. So I don't know why this one always gets, oh, that's grind. And I get it. They're like the blueprint for gore grind, especially Rika Putrefaction. But this one is way more death metal, way more melody in this, and just the guitar tone on this is just immense, man. And the vocals, the dual vocals on this, the gurgling and the, oh my god, the double fucking attack. Rika Putrefaction, Exhumed to Consume is a fucking crushing song. Ruptured in Purulence, just fucking immense fucking songs with immense lyrics on this. Just sick, gross lyrics. About basically kind of veganism, I guess. Their take on veganism, but Great band, great fucking. Again, I didn't really. I liked Necrotism after that. Heartworks, Black. Um, yeah, they just got too. They got too much into themselves, all technical, and which is fine. It's just a different band. So for me, like those records, and a lot of people be like, "Oh, Heartworks essential because XYZ," and I'm like, XYZ what? Just because it's technical doesn't mean it's a better record. And I don't like that's how people view if you watch a lot of these videos on what their favorite records are or essential death metal, it's always about musicianship. Like, oh my god, the drummer's going off and X like this guy plays the bass so well and he writes 80 million riffs and like I don't give a fuck, dude. I don't care about how many riffs are written for a fucking song. I care about how well the song is written and if it sounds like death metal. If it sounds like a wank fest, why do I want it? I mean, I get it. There's fans of that shit and, like it. Just to me, that's not death metal. That's music, I guess. Progressive death metal and that kind of crap is just not my thing. But why am I telling you guys? You already know this. Let's go on to something else. All right. And for 1990, we have another Swedish banger, Entombed, formerly of Nihilist. Mass Death. Thrushing guitars. Mass Death. I mean, they're not wrong. Um, dude, Left Hand Path, one of the best death metal songs ever written. No one's going to argue that. Drown, Revel in Flesh, When Life Has Ceased, Supposed to Rot, But Life Goes On, Bitter Loss, Morbid Devourment, Abnormally Deceased, and The Truth Beyond. I mean, just one of the best fucking records, death metal records ever written. Obviously, I brought out the Nihilist as well, which was a lot of these songs are off the demos, which are right there. You can see all the demos, and this one actually comes with the Entombed demo 7-inch as well, which is cool. But almost, I think 80% of that record, I think only 3 songs are not a Nihilist song. So, um, I would put Nihilist, obviously, one of my favorite bands. I had all the demos before that album came out and the Entombed demo. So, what can you say, man? You can't say much about Left Hand Path. The basically the fucking blueprint for HM2 death metal. Well, where they started really getting into rhythms, especially with the end of the first song with the Phantasm theme, where you start to get that horror vibe. Just fucking killer fucking death metal, man. All right. Where are we at? What was that? Number 6, number 5? I always lose track of numbers when I do these things. Yeah, that was number 6. So number 5, we are going with. This one's a hard pick for me because I thought both these albums were essential by the same band, just in different ways, I guess. So I'll start out with the Altars of Madness because this record was such a fucking big record for me when it came out. Um, this is just a fucking repress. I never had the vinyl. I bought the original when it came out. I bought the CD for some reason. I had the cassette too, but never bought the vinyl for some reason. Guess I just never saw it. Um, but this version sounds good for a repress. I mean, the fucking cover kind of looks like shit, but a lot of represses, the covers always look kind of like blown out. Is what it is, I guess. Um, but I just wanted a version on record just to have basically the cover. Even the cover looks okay, honestly, on this version. Doesn't look that bad. Just Eric usually does a pretty good job with the sound, so. But yeah, man. Immortal Rites, Suffocation, Visions from the Dark Side, Maze of Torment, Chapel of Ghouls, Bleed for the Devil, Damnation, Blasphemy, Evil Spells. Every song's a banger on here, and again, a lot of these came from the demos. So, and I had the 7-inch and the demo, Thy Kingdom Come demo before I got this record, but this was a whole different ball game for me when I heard this record. It just fucking rips, especially some of the newer songs like Immortal Rights. Um, but I always liked this version, and this was supposed to be the first record that David Vincent was supposed to put out on his label, but it never came to. And I guess they got into a big fight with Trey and Mike Browning, so this record never came out. But I still think this is a darker record um, than Alters. It just sounds a little bit darker, and that's saying something because Alter sounds pretty dark as well. This was a boot on Satanic Records. I think it was like 1,000 copies. There were some glow in the dark versions and stuff, but this actually came out on cassette by the band before this version was released. So, and I had that cassette, which was supposed to be the first full length, obviously. So, but yeah, man, Chapel of Ghouls is on here, Angel of Disease, Lord of All Fevers and Plagues, Abominations, Welcome to Hell, which was changed. I forgot to what song, but um, Lord of All Fevers. Yeah, man, just killer fucking satanic death metal. And, reading about this record and where they were is they were just really into the Necronomicon at the time. They were like doing a lot of the spells from that book. They thought it was like real, even though it was just made up by Lovecraft. But just a great, great fucking record. You could tell like there's some crazy shit going on that. But I can't tell which one I like more. Sometimes I like Altars more. Sometimes I like Abominations. It just depends. And it's like sometimes I like Vincent's vocals. Sometimes I like Browning's vocals. Just depends on the mood I'm in. But they're both just fucking excellent records. Obviously, the production on Altars is a lot better. Um, and then David Vincent, like, basically hijacked the band after that, after Mike was out of the band. But he went on to Nocturnus, so that's cool. All right, up next, um, where are we at? Three. No, number four. We are going with one of my all-time favorite records. Surprise! Necrophagia, Season of the Dead. Probably this came out in what, 87, I believe. Yeah, 87. The Morbid Angel came out in 89, in case I didn't say that. And the other one, Abominations, came out in 86, so that's telling you something. And this was 87. So very early death metal, right? And I don't think this record gets enough props, man. Nobody ever talks about that. Just there's no essential death metal list besides mine right now that's going to be on YouTube that shouts out Necrophagia. They're just not, unless some old dude decides to do a list as well, and then that might show up. But Forbidden Pleasure, Bleeding Torment, Insane for Blood, Reincarnation, Ancient Slumber, Mental Decay, Abomination, Terminal Vision, Painful Discharge, Beyond and Back. Just really fucking great rhythms on this. This is the new Renaissance Records version. Obviously, it's been re-released. I think Nuclear War released a copy too, because I have a different copy that's like colored vinyl. I got a picture disc. I got the cassette. I got all sorts of that shit. But man, for me, this record, it never fails to be just killer every time I watch it. Or watch it every time I listen to it. It's like watching a horror movie, honestly. Obviously, songs here about Evil Dead and other horror movies, but great, great fucking record. But brings me to this one too, man, which is kind of like one of those Morbid Angel things. Was this record, Ready for Death, which came out. This was supposed to come out in '86 as their first record, but it didn't get released until 1990, which was weird. So a lot of people thought this was their second record. This was actually released on Embalming Records. And it basically says on here, this album that Necrophagia, because they didn't spell the fucking name right. Necrophagia. um, First record company banned because it was too intense, may be considered offensive to some people. So they got distribution somehow on this, and it looks professional. It was only like 1,000 copies, and I was already heavily into death metal when this came out, so I was like, "What is that thing?" So I bought it, and I was like, "Oh, it sounds like a demo," which it does sound like a demo, and I think that's why it wasn't actually released by New Renaissance, is because the sound quality wasn't that great. So they re-recorded a lot of the songs for Season of the Dead. This has a lot of the demo songs on it: World Funeral, Lust of the Naked Dead, Hemorrhage, Ready for Death, Ancient Slumber, Black Apparition, Bloodthirsty, Mental Decay, Communion of Death, Return to Life. And Embalming actually sold this to New Renaissance Records because they had the tapes, and I don't know how they ended up with them, but New Renaissance actually ended up putting it out after on green with no cover, limited to 500. So if anyone has a copy of that they want to sell me, I'll take it. But this is just raw demo sounding material, but it sounds fucking just dirty and nasty and fucking death metal as shit for 1986, man. All right, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Number 3, we are going Possessed, Seven Churches. And I know what you're going to say. Oh, that's a thrash record, man. This is not a thrash record. This is definitely death metal with black metal lyrics. The song structures are very much what death metal turned into. A lot of people stole from this record. Uh, but yeah, man, just a fucking great record. Exorcist, Pentagram, Burning in Hell, Evil Warrior, Seven Churches, Satan's Curse, Holy Hell, Twisted Minds, Fallen Angel, and death metal. Um, and you could say it has a lot of thrash elements too, but a lot of early death metal, even later death metal, has thrash elements. And I think people are just too hard on this record. It's like, oh, it's thrash because it doesn't sound like fucking Mortician or something. It's like, that doesn't mean it's not death metal. It just means it doesn't sound like brutal death metal. So I think that's where people get like certain bands confused as to what death metal is. For me, death metal is just a rougher version of thrash, and it's heavier. And like I said, it has more rhythms to it. It doesn't, and the lyrics are always very death driven, right? Uh, and also, it has the vocals are gruff, and the vocals are gruff on this. So, and you can listen to like other bands that people consider death metal, like Malevolent Creation. I think the vocals are probably not even as gruff as this, but people consider them death metal. So Pestilence is another one. All right, on to the next one. But yeah, Stone Cold classic, man. Right along with this one, death, scream, bloody gore. Got this when it came out. Fucking genre changer for sure. Just amazing, dude. Infernal Death, Zombie Ritual, Denial of Life, Sacrificial, Mutilation, Regurgitated Guts, Baptized in Blood, Torn to Pieces, Evil Dead, Scream Bloody Gore. And the Possessed was from 85. This is from 87. So you can see where the transition kind of is. But I mean, even Death has said that Possessed was their influence on this record. So that goes to show something. That's what Chuck said. Like, oh no, man, it's all about Possessed. Like, they're the ones that like led us down this path to how we sound. Um, and a lot of this is again based on horror movies. The same thing as the Necrophagia. Just a fucking crushing death metal record. And a lot of bands still try to sound like this. And obviously, this band went on to be, one of those technical death metal bands that people love, and which is fine. It's just not, that to me is not death. That's not the meaning of death metal to me. Like, playing a million riffs and being technical is fine, but there's a whole reason why death metal exists, and it's not for that. But yeah, man, Stone Cold classic. Number 2. Number 1, Autopsy, Severed Survival, man. They basically took what death was doing and just cranked up the heaviness and grossness to 10. This is the album Death wish they had put out after Scream Bloody Gore, man. Just fucking nasty. Charred remains, service for a vacant coffin, disembowel, gasping for air, ridden with disease, pagan savior, impending dread, severed survival, critical madness, embalmed. Again, a lot of these are attached to low budget horror movies coming out at the time. Rawhead Rex, Critical Madness, which was Truth or Dare. I'm sure there's more on here. But yeah, man, just this record again. The rhythms on this, the eeriness of some of the guitar tones, just man. And you could tell like with the Nihilist shirt too, how like this genre was just like molding into like this worldwide kind of thing, right? Kind of like everybody was tape trading and getting into these bands. And these first bands, they were leading the way to like, what became a death metal in the future and what it is now. I mean, Autopsy and Entombed and Grave, those all have to be three of the top bands that all these newer bands are influenced by. I mean, you hear it, sounds like Autopsy mixed with Grave, mixed with Entombed, mixed with Morbid Angel, right? Like, they always name drop all these bands when they talk about newer bands. So that's why these records are essential. But let me know what you think. Did I miss some, or do you think there's some essential stuff I missed? And remember, this isn't my favorites list. This is not my favorite death metal records of all time. These are essential to the genre. Okay. All right, guys. Hope you like the vid. Talk to you soon. Cheers.